Let's look at Psalm 122, verse 9. We've sung the psalm, and I'll just read to you again the last verse. Because of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek thy good. The reason we are here today is to seek the good of Christ's church. And so it seemed right to stir ourselves up in that seeking by considering the psalmist's resolution to do the same in Psalm 122, verse 9. For this seeking, the psalmist gives first a reason and then a resolution. First, the reason. Because of the house of the Lord our God. This means, as far as I can see, because thou, Jerusalem, whom he's addressing, art the Lord's house. That's why I'll make this resolution. Could possibly mean to explain his speaking in this psalm the way he has. Because I'm speaking in the psalm not just of a city or a building or a nation in an earthly sense, but the very house of the Lord our God. As the psalm began in verse 1, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. This is a reminder that in both the Old Testament and the New, words used in this psalm and elsewhere, Jerusalem, Zion, Israel, the temple, the house of God, the people of God, are all used figuratively, according to the nature of Old Testament types and shadows, to represent two related things, one subordinate to the other. The first is heaven, the place where God's glory dwells and the triumphant church continually praises him. And the second is the church, the people who belong to heaven. And that both, first, the triumphant church that is already in heaven, physically at least in their souls, but also, second, the militant church, the church upon this earth that still fights. This militant church is an outpost of heaven. It belongs to heaven spiritually, and it's fighting to get there. It's like the people of Israel in the wilderness. They already possessed Canaan by right and promise, but they still had to travel through the wilderness before they could enjoy the use of it. The church's good ought to be sought then, because it is the house of the Lord our God, the army of heaven on the earth, the temple in which God is pleased to dwell by a special saving grace and power. Indeed, it's the people whose good God has resolved to seek. And thus it's very fitting that he moves from this reason to his resolution. I will seek thy good. That is, with desire, with prayers such as he made in the psalm for her peace, with labors like Moses, who built the tabernacle exactly according to the pattern shown to him on the mount, like Solomon, whose careful temple building is laid out in 1 Kings 5-7 and was crowned by his humble, earnest prayer in 1 Kings 8, showing his heart to seek the good of the house of God. And most of all, like Christ, who excelled Moses and Solomon in giving his own self unto death and unto cursing for the church's salvation. He loved us and gave himself for us. Because of all that, and after that pattern, I, the psalmist says, will give myself first, foremost, and freely, pouring out my time, my resources, and my heart to build the house of God. I, O church, will seek thy good. Now, the duty of the text is clear before us, and there's no need to elaborate it or make further proof. I want to apply it, though, for us. The first application is that of examination. The psalmist has made this resolution, and God has put it even now upon your lips. It's easy enough to sing, but it's a harder thing to make. Have you? Is this the testimony of your heart as well as your lips? I will seek thy good. Will you, from the bottom of your heart, seek the good of the heavenly Jerusalem? Psalm 27, verse 4, has a similar promise that considers the same thing from a different angle. One thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. That psalmist is speaking of life in the house of God. He's not directly promising to seek her good, but he is asserting that all his own good is found there. And thus these two things come together. Have you made such a resolution in your heart? And second, have you kept such a resolution? Does your life agree with all the godly and with Christ himself, who gave all of themselves for God's house? I'll take another example. We saw Solomon in Christ. Consider David, Psalm 132. Lord, remember David. Perhaps David himself is writing this, like Nehemiah says, Lord, remember me for my good. And all his afflictions, and note what he did in his afflictions, how they did not turn him from his purpose. How he sware unto the Lord and vowed unto the mighty God of Jacob, surely I will not come into the tabernacle of my house, nor go up into my bed. I will not give sleep to mine eyes or slumber to mine eyelids until I find out a place for the Lord, an habitation for the mighty God of Jacob. Now, this promise certainly speaks of his desire to see the ark return to Israel. But what was that desire but a type, a shadow that he self-consciously used as a means of seeking the good of the heavenly church? He had a heart for Zion, spiritually speaking, and it motivated him to put aside, to some extent at least, his sleep and his comfort at his home until he could see God in his house well cared for. Does your life agree with that? That's what it looks like to keep this resolution. So first, examine yourself. The second duty is an exhortation for you to do this very thing, to give all you have for the church's good. We can speak first of your wealth. It's a good marker of your heart. Do you give what wealth, what resources you have for the good of the house of God? God exhorts you to this in Malachi 3:10. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house. In the Old Testament, that was proven by the abundance of the sacrifices, but there's an overlap in that the sacrifices fed the ministers, and the largest part of our giving today does the same thing. And the ministers are central to the ministry and to the upbuilding of the kingdom, so this is very fitting. That there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. You won't be a debtor to God if you give in this way. He encourages you in this. And I trust, knowing all of you, that you are generous men. He has repaid you in these ways. And you could tell many stories. So give of your wealth. Give of your time. Acts 20:31 gives a clear example of Paul giving of his time. Acts 20, he's speaking to the Ephesian elders who've met him in Miletus. And he says in verse 31, therefore watch, lose sleep yourself sometimes, and remember that by the space of 3 years I cease not to warn everyone, night and day, with tears. Now, like David in Psalm 132, he's not saying I never ever slept, but I did not count my sleep worth that much compared to this most important labor that I had for you and for the good of your soul. And I poured out not only my time, but my tears. Go and do likewise, brethren. Pour out your strength for God from the same Paul, 2 Corinthians 1:8. For we would not, brethren, have you ignorant of our trouble which came to us in Asia, that we were pressed out of measure, above strength, insomuch that we despaired even of life. My ministry for the good of the church was such a burden on me, I thought I was going to die. Perhaps you've come into that situation in your service to the church. I hope you reminded yourself then, this is normal. This is the life of a minister, of an elder, of a servant of Christ. Paul is following, of course, Christ himself, and that brings us to the greatest example. Do you remember how Paul exhorts husbands in Ephesians 5:24? They're to love their wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. And his gift of himself and all that it means, especially dying under the wrath of God for our salvation, is infinitely more precious than anything those others gave, and they are but mere pictures of his glorious sacrifice for the good of the church. So I ask you, in light of all these examples that all point us to Christ and his, how can you spare anything for Christ when he spared nothing for you? Especially if you are in the ministry as a vocation. If it's your full-time labor, as is spoken of in 1 Timothy 5:17, you are one appointed to labor in the word. Then, even at certain times of need, even while making tents to earn your bread, as Paul did in Ephesus, as he told them in Acts 20, as he did in Corinth, and as he explains in 1 Corinthians 9, you have to give yourself. You have to labor and pour out your soul. Spend and be spent, as Paul says. Whether minister or not, I want to give you a help to keep this exhortation. Imagine the last day. Christ, the glorious judge, will be there, and he will have his wounds visible in his hands as a reminder that he gave himself for the church. Paul will be nearby watching, surrounded by thousands of souls that he personally saved, and no doubt receiving a reward for all the work he did for the salvation of nearly all the others that came after him. With them will be John Calvin, who preached and lectured every day while he was consumed with writing, pastoring, and evangelizing his beloved France, and consumed as well with disease and weakness. There will also be John Welch of Ayr, who prayed 7 hours every day. Richard Baxter, who made time to visit all 800 families in his parish at least once per year. David Brainerd, who in our country gave himself through illness and depression, dying temporally so that others might live eternally. When you are there and see all those, all the excuses you make now for your lack of diligence in seeking the good of the house of the Lord will all melt away. So let the vision of that judgment melt them now. And stir up your heart to say, and your life to confirm this resolution to the church: I will seek thy good. Thus an exhortation. Third and finally, a note of consolation. Seeking the church's good will bring your good as well. And that will come no matter what evil you have had to endure for Christ's cause. He will reward, and that reward will make all of it worth it. His own example again proves this to us. Christ had to die to lay the foundation of the house of the Lord, but then he rose again, and he ascended, and he has now the name that is above every name. And there, as he said, he is preparing a place for all who follow him in sacrificial labor for his kingdom. David was assured of this, and so should you be. Those who serve God's house will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And that should be enough to give you comfort in the troubles that will come from this ministry. The Lord will reward. He will say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." And that comfort should motivate you all the more to resolve with all your heart, "I will seek thy good." Let's stand and pray again.